Hey everyone, welcome back to the Aggie Pride podcast. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder, if you're enjoying the show, please take a second to like, subscribe, and share it with your fellow Aggies. It really helps us grow, and if you want to go a step further, consider supporting the podcast through a sponsorship or donation. Every bit helps us keep the content coming. Thanks for being part of the ride, and now let's get into it. It is technically still off season, but we're picking up some steam because June 26th, day of recording, means we're less than 2 months away from what will probably be a 1,000 degree kickoff temperature in wherever the hell Alabama Mercer is. Today we have a special guest. It's the voice of the Ags. It's Scott Marsh, and we're going to talk all things Aggie football and just to catch up. So Scott, thanks for joining us. Do tell us, how's life been?
Life is good, Brock. And first of all, it's just great to be back on the show. And it's less than 2 months from the kickoff back in Montgomery. And it's a 7 o'clock kick. So hopefully that'll help with the temperature, not the humidity back there. Mercer's actually a school in Georgia, but they'll have the home crowd for sure. Training camp, believe it or not, fall camp opens less than a month from today. July 23rd is the first date for fall camp. So it's pretty amazing that, to your point, there really is no such thing as an off season. It's college athletics has become like pro sports where it's just pretty much 12 months a year, 24/7. There's always stories, subplots, everything going on. So it's an interesting year for the Ags because they literally have the first game of the season this year. And that's 7 o'clock. And that's Central Time game. So 5 o'clock out here will be the first college football game of the year on ESPN. So it is a great way to kick off the year.
I believe it's the first ever game on ESPN. Uno. We've been on Dose. We've been on U. We've been on Plus.
Tried out all the other ones.
This is the real deal. And I know that in previous years, ESPN has promoted the FCS kickoff game pretty well. So it'll be interesting to see. And looking at that schedule, there's a game on ABC as well around the same time. And I think it's like a HBCU matchup, if I'm not mistaken. And then there's a game earlier in the day as well on ESPN. So the hope, fingers crossed, is that people just ride it out on ESPN Uno, stick around for our game against Mercer, which, since we're talking about it, is another quarterfinalist playoff team from last year. They're ranked right behind us, if I'm not mistaken, or ahead of us. I can't remember, in the first rankings that came out by the Stats Perform poll. So that's going to be a sweet matchup. We won't dive into it yet because there's a lot of other things on our mind. But something on my mind, Scott, is in addition to being the Aggies basketball, football announcer, you also work over the bridge or over the causeway in Sacramento. I guess, what have the last handful of months been like for you, just covering local sports? You got the athletics in town now. What's it been like doing the day job for you?
It's just been busy. I mean, sports, there's always just a ton of things going on. So, for my main job at the station, I was just down meeting with the people from the 49ers and, we carry them as well. So I got a chance to be at their partner summit, and that was a lot of fun, and working with the broadcast partners and team and Greg Papa and Tim Ryan and the crew down there. And that's a lot of fun. And the Niners certainly are looking for a bounce back year after what happened last year and signing Purdy to that $250 million contract. They're expecting big things. Kingsland, huge, with Doug Christie being named head coach, Bobby Jackson an assistant coach, the running back, the old crew, see if they can get this thing going. It was a disappointing end to the year. Certainly the way they crashed out in that play-in game against Dallas left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. And so this offseason's big, and you've got Summer League in Vegas coming up in July. And, there's always something going on, Brock. We could have our own separate podcast about what just happens around Sacktown sports and what's going on in the summertime.
Okay, so you mentioned two of my childhood heroes, because even though, as people who listen to this know, I'm obsessed with the Warriors and Steph Curry.
Yeah.
I fell in love with basketball kind of later in middle school, and it was when Bobby Jackson, Doug Christie, Chris Webber,
Yeah.
Vlade Divac, and then a name I'm about to mention was my favorite, who is the new men's basketball coach at Sac State,
Yep.
in Mike Bibby.
Yeah.
Let's actually do this, and some people are going to get pissed, but they can fast forward. Let's start with the neighbors in Sacramento. I'm assuming you have more information than most because of your proximity to the campus and your connection. If you just process out loud with us what's going on at Sac State and Mr. Wood and Brennan Marion and the smoke.
Well, it's interesting, and I know this is an Aggie Pride, podcast here that you've done such a great job with. But if we're talking about Sac State and just kind of looking it over, you know me, I'm a Kings guy. I was a huge Mike Bibby guy. I think he's going to do a good job there. I think for the Hornets, it was a great signing because they really haven't won in basketball at all. So why not bring in a local legend and give him a chance? You're probably going to raise some more dollars by doing that, a little more high profile in terms of the athlete you can get. It's still an uphill battle, but I'm wishing Mike a lot of success because I just personally like him. And, as I've told you, Brock, before, I'm not one of these guys. And, I know this might upset some people in the Aggie Pride listening audience, but I've never been a guy who's rooted against Sac State just because I'm a UC Davis guy. I want to see the region do well. I live in Sacramento. I work at a Sacramento sports station. So, I'd love to see them have success. Of course, I'm always going to be rooting for the Aggies more, and I'm always going to be on our side of the causeway. But I think they're doing some things. The football side, I don't know, getting out of the Big Sky to try and get an independent FBS seems like a interesting strategy. Unless you've got a conference you're going to be accepted into right away. That independent FBS road is a really tough one. I mean, unless you're going out on the road 8 to 10 of your 12 games for a prolonged period of time. I don't really know how that works. So I'm not sure about that. Davis has obviously gone the other way, right? They have committed to the Mountain West Conference. Sac State is moving into the Big West where UC Davis was. It almost feels like Davis is the school that's going further out now, We'll see about football. UC Davis is content to be in the Big Sky for now. Will they eventually move into the Mountain West over a period of time? What will that look like? Ultimately in 4 to 5 years, what will the Mountain West Conference look like too? All these things, college sports right now is just such a crazy coming together of all these different elements. But, Sac State's making a lot of noise. We'll see where it goes. UC Davis has got its path already charted out in a very defined way. And, UC Davis isn't out there trying to make a lot of noise. They're just getting a lot of things done.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's get into the Ags. We're less than 2 months away from the opener, as we mentioned, to kick it off. And I guess I'm looking for your state of UC Davis football.
Yeah.
We're fresh off of a really successful first campaign under Coach Plow.
Well, let's call it what it was, historic. I mean, it was maybe the best campaign ever in UC Davis football. I know, the year with Keelan Doss and Jake Mayer would be right up there as well. And I wouldn't want to call one better than the other per se. You could make arguments either way on that, but certainly it's one of the top 2 greatest seasons in Aggie history.
Yeah. And so with that being said, we go through an offseason where we did utilize the portal to get a number of transfers, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah. But even in listening to a recent interview by Coach Plow with the Big Sky Sports crew, he talked about our model still being developing high school student athletes. Yeah. And we will get to quarterback in a moment, but setting aside that battle that occurred during spring ball, how do you kind of make up our roster considering the loss of Land Larison and all of our top receivers and some of the big names on defense graduating or grad transferring as well? How do you just make up this roster and where you see it at heading into the season?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, you're not going to replace Land Larison, right? Hopefully we'll see him running in New England on Sundays, right? Where he's by all accounts, off to a great start with the Patriots. I do think the offensive side of the ball is going to be okay, though. I mean, and that's crazy to say when you lose Miles Hastings and you lose Land Larison, two of your great players of all time. Wide receivers, they return quite a bit still with Batu, who I think will be a breakout wide receiver. They've brought in a couple new guys. Dobbins, freshman from last year, Stacey Dobbins, I think can have a breakout campaign. Not as concerned about the wideouts. I'm really looking forward to watching Jordan Fisher run the football this season. They've got a couple other backs. Mateo Perez is back, which is great to have. And you've got your offensive line back, right? So the O-line is back intact, and that's a good group. And you've got two of the best tight ends in the country right now with Winston Williams and Ian Simpson. I think Winston Williams ranked the second best returning tight end in the country. And he's such a great story coming off injury to do what he's doing right now. So I think there's a lot of good things offensively for this team. And we'll get into quarterback, I'm sure, in another question. So I'll save that. Defensively, a lot of gaps, at least on paper. They do have the Connors brothers coming back, and that was huge to get Rex, and Porter, you had to have them coming back. So, Kavir Baines is going to Pittsburgh, so that's a challenge, but he got $200,000 to go there, and that was all legit, and Coach Plow talked about that, and it's a good move for him. And, one thing about UC Davis, they're always going to encourage players who have graduated to do the best things for themselves. And so Kavir is really making a move that's business related, but also just good for his future. And I applaud that. So defensively, a little bit more of a work in progress, but at least you have a couple of anchors coming back, which will help.
Yeah. Coach Plow mentioned on the podcast that I referenced on Big Sky Sports, with Coulter Nuanez, who's one of the big media personalities, I would say, for the Big Sky Conference and football coverage overall. Of course, the Montanas have a lot of coverage on their programs, whereas even here locally, I think there's not as much that comes out. Even the Joe Davidson article after spring ball, where I took it as Caden Pinnock is the guy, was one of the kind of big nuggets that we were able to glean. But something that Coach Plow said in this interview is they're going after high school kids. They want to develop him. And I've heard him give this pitch before on another podcast that when a kid graduates, like you mentioned, you can go make $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 playing football somewhere else, a la Teddy Buchanan. And if you're good enough, you'll go make more money on Sundays playing football, which is what Teddy's doing with the Baltimore Ravens. So it's interesting to hear his pitch because, like you said, the college football landscape is changing so much, and it makes me wonder, like, what is a Sac State pitching to those guys, and how does that differ with us? So I guess I'd like to know your thoughts on how UC Davis is going about inserting itself in a really challenging and aggressive recruiting season.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point. And, again, I'm happy for Kavir, just kind of following up with that. And what Teddy Buchanan did, getting drafted in the 4th round by the Ravens. I mean, the home of Ray Lewis and all of those household linebacker names. And now he has a chance to follow in that line. That's truly amazing. And it is great, because the Aggies are stepping up and starting to have some NIL opportunities too, and that's certainly with Rex and with Porter Connors, and that's good. But the model of the high school model is still UC Davis bread and butter because Davis is a 4-year institution that wants to graduate students and wants them to stay there the entire time. And Tim makes a great point that now so many people are focusing simply on the transfer portal that high school kids are not getting the same opportunities that they would have years ago. So some of the great high school athletes are now getting overlooked for transfer portal players. And that's where UC Davis can maybe dive in and get some of the elite high school players that may not have considered UC Davis before. The Sac State model seems to be different than that. They've gone to the transfer portal. It feels like they kind of became the Colorado of football this past year in terms of all the players that they let go from that team and all the new people they've brought in with the new head coach. And so I think their model is much more year to year right now. than UC Davis. So UC Davis will never become a year-to-year type model. It's just the school is too strong. It's too based on the student athlete model, the academic model. I just can't ever envision a situation where UC Davis still isn't 90% 4-year athletes, 4 or 5-year athletes.
Yeah. Couple different directions I want to go. One of them is out of the incoming players, thinking of transfers and then potential freshmen who could see the field. And I'll even add in a group of players on the roster who we just haven't seen get meaningful snaps. Is there a name or two, either from conversations you've had with coaches or from people associated with the program, that you expect to be maybe a breakout player for 2025?
Okay, well, now we got to start talking about quarterback, right? So obviously, with Miles Hastings gone, and he what a year he had to put himself in the same vein of a Jake Mayer, just a tremendous career. But I am looking so forward to seeing Caden Pinnock take the field for the Aggies. And, I know that Tim Plow maybe hasn't announced an official starter yet for next season going into fall, but I think it's pretty clear that it will be Caden Pinnock on that. And of course, he is the redshirt freshman out of Del Oro High School, who is an athlete. I had a chance to see him a lot in spring ball in the final spring game, where unfortunately he got banged up a little bit, didn't finish that. But his passing is off the charts. His arm strength is incredible. His ability to move the pocket and run, second to none. And his leadership is the thing that makes him really stand out for a true redshirt freshman. He has the leadership skills of a senior, and he commands respect from that team. And I really am looking forward to big things. I know, like anybody starting as a freshman at quarterback, there's going to be some ups and downs and some trials and tribulations, but I think he is a true potential to be one of the all-time Aggie greats. And I know that Tim Plow feels that way also.
Yeah, I mean, for him to make a decision to go with a freshman, I know he's got a year of redshirting under his belt. When you have someone like Grant Harper, who's been seasoned and ready and has the physical tools and the mental capacity from what we hear, knowing the offense for all these years, to me, that really signaled that there's high hopes for Caden Pinnock. And I mentioned this to Scott Gordon, who talked about Caden potentially being a Wildcat last year. He said, oh, yeah, maybe we'll see Caden Pinnock on some Wildcat. And I had CJ Spencer flashes going through my head of, okay, maybe this will be like a goal line guy, but he's smaller in stature. And so I asked Mr. Gordon, how do we think the offense is going to be different? I'm not going to ask you that because I feel like he gave me enough meat where the understanding is we're going to still run our offense. We just have a different type of athlete back there who can break out of the pocket, go off script, and make some kind of A-plus plays that maybe Coach Plow is not expecting. I more so want to take us down the road of we open up week 1 on ESPN against one of the top 8 teams from 2024. Where it's a quote-unquote neutral game that we all know is an away game for us and a home game for them.
No doubt.
And then we have the game against Washington. And we, of course, play Montana State at the end of the year and have Causeway Classic with this juggernaut supposed Sac State team. So I'm wondering, how are we expecting this young quarterback to navigate the expectations of a team like UC Davis that has, I think, a new set of expectations? And I'll add one more piece before getting your thoughts. It takes me back to a different time in Aggie history. The last time I remember a quarterback this young playing was when I played, and very first game of the year, true freshman Randy Wright takes the field at Memorial Stadium, and we get shellacked 52-3, and bless Randy's heart, I think it was a struggle those first couple years for him, even though he ended up with a solid career and played a ton of games. It felt like we gave Randy a runway, and this feels different. this feels like we want to win the national championship. How do you think he's going to navigate that?
Well, let's not confuse Mercer with Cal. As good as Mercer is, going into Memorial Stadium, a different challenge. And I just remember that game at Cal. I remember seeing a freshman wide receiver out of Virginia by the name of Keenan Allen, who just looked 100 times better than any other player on that field. And I was right about that. But, I feel like I could be an NFL scout, because when I saw Keenan Allen take the field and do what he did in his first game as a college athlete, I'm like, this guy is going to have a great NFL career. And certainly he has done that. That's a different story. But I feel like Caden Pennick, Randy Wright was a true freshman. So Pennick's been there a full year, and that's something you can't overlook also. And not to ever refute anything my terrific broadcast partner Scott Gordon might say, because he's the analyst, so he knows the game. He played quarterback. But I do think you're going to see a little bit different Aggie offense with Caden Pennick, not just Pennick making plays out of the same offense. I think Tim Plow and Paul Shelton and company, they're going to have a specific offense designed for Caden Pennick and his abilities. So, and I'm really looking forward to that. And I think you're going to see a lot more read, RPO plays and things like that too, to take advantage of Caden Pennick's strength, which is his mobility as much as his arm strength. So, it's going to be interesting to see. The one thing that I think everybody to a man is impressed about out there on the YOLO side of the causeway is just the tremendous leadership ability of Caden Pennick. I mean, they are blown away by this kid. Even as a freshman, when they first met him, he took the train to meet Tim Plow for the first time, got up at like 5 o'clock in the morning and met, and legendary conversation with Tim Plow. I wasn't asking, about the program or anything. It was pretty much a conversation of what they were going to do for him, right? And just trying to figure this thing out. I mean, he was a real on top, sharp guy who had a lot of questions. And as Tim Plow said, it wasn't so much me interviewing him as myself getting interviewed about why he should come to UC Davis. So, some pretty interesting stuff there. And, we'll see. When a first game happens, there's so much unknown. When you get in the line of fire, it's a lot to put on any one individual. But I do have high hopes that he could be something really special.
Yeah. Well, you talked about the first game. Looking a quick glance at the schedule beyond the week 0 matchup at Mercer in Montgomery. Yep. We then go on to the road at Utah Tech. We have a really tough game in Seattle against the Huskies. Mm-hmm. First home game is not until September 20th, which I think the first round of students might be at.
Yeah, and they position it that way so they would have students there. So, I mean, it's not till week 5 in the schedule, really, because they've got a bye after those 3 road games. But going to Seattle will be interesting too. And the first 3 games are all going to be night games, which is interesting as well. So, and then obviously there'll be night games at Davis too. So a lot of night games in August and September for the Aggies, and a lot of bright lights as well. And that Utah Tech game won't be any cupcake either. Utah Tech at home. They'll be a much better team this year. So, but obviously it'll be a great challenge to start the year.
Yeah, and then looking at the Big Sky slate, we dodge Montana, we dodge Eastern Washington, and I think in a sense for me, you got Weber State, Cal Poly, Northern Arizona, Northern Colorado, Idaho State. That historically the last couple of years is not a tough schedule, and then we finish with 3 bangers, similarly to last season. Idaho, Montana State, both on the road, and then back at home against Sac State. Any one or two of those games stand out to you?
Well, of course, Sac State's going to stand out. I mean, that's a monster game at home. It's the final time that game's going to be played on the last game of the year, most likely. It's the final time it'll have a conference ramification with the Hornets moving out of the Big Sky. And it'll be kind of an end of an era. It might be the last time these 2 schools play. Possibly. I mean, I hope the rivalry stays intact, and I hope they find a way to make it a non-conference schedule. And you got to think that they would, but there's no guarantee of that, right? So, With the Hornets moving out effectively after next season, that's going to change all sorts of scheduling and everything else. So that is going to be a monster game. It's going to be a game for the ages. Going to Montana State, and what happened last year at home. Montana State coming so close to winning it all. Obviously, they graduated a lot of players as well, but that's got some payback in it from what happened last season with Montana State wrapping up the conference, out at UC Davis Health Stadium. Idaho State rolling into UC Davis is going to be a marquee game with the Hawkins brother.
I wonder,
son and father on the same coaching staff with Cody and, of course, Dan, the former head coach and the former offensive coordinator. You can't discount that's going to have some emotion and some drama to that one too, that a lot of people are going to be excited about for a number of reasons. So there's a lot of games to look forward to this year in conference.
Yeah, that is so interesting. You said Idaho State, and I'm kind of like, okay, where are we going with this? And I quickly realized it's not just Cody.
No.
It's probably Dan.
Yeah, Dan will be on the sideline as well.
Interesting. That will have some extra emotion.
You'll have some juice going.
Yeah. The competitive juices when you've played together or coached together is just a little different. And the whole how much do you know each other, and it's different to game plan against someone who knows your system so intimately. So that'll be very
the last time we played there, it was such a massive story because it was father, coaching against son. I mean, that was like game day, like lead top 3 games, father-son matchup, right? So you don't have quite that in the same way. It's more of a return of Dan Hawkins. And, again, Dan did a great job at this program, and Tim Plow was the offensive coordinator for Dan Hawkins. So, it's going to be a really interesting time to have him back on campus after his 8 years at UC Davis, and with Cody being a large part of that. He was part of the coaching staff for I think all of those years.
Yeah.
Or most of them. I mean, besides the last one, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I will just give this shout out for the APP on the road tour. I will be pushing for a Seattle weekend because not only do we play in one of the most beautiful venues in the country alongside the water with the dome or with the covered roof and a really good fan base, but the morning after is going to be a special matchup at Lumen Field.
Got the 49ers
Seattle.
And the Seahawks on Sunday.
I mean, come on.
Well, I'm staying for the weekend. I've already planned that one out.
That is got way too much not to go to, so I'm pretty sure I will be there.
Yeah.
And then the other weekend that I know from a weekend away standpoint is the Battle of the Golden Horseshoe, first weekend in October.
Yeah.
The Galvin fam is going to be going down to that one. It'll be interesting to see. I was down in Slow not too long ago as we kick around the Big Sky, and they're making slow progress on their football facility, the John Madden Football Center, which is right connected to the stadium and doesn't look like it's going to have the same bells and whistles as ours, but it still will be a pretty amazing football facility for a Big Sky program.
Yeah, I'm interested in that. I mean, it was supposed to be a $50 million facility, and I don't know if it's going to end up being that or not. And it's football only, which is also interesting, too. I mean, obviously, the Edwards Center, which is so amazing, is for all sports. So I'm interested to see how that works. And, of course, you have Paul Wolf, who is from Davis, played football at Davis High, coached at Eastern Washington. He was an assistant with Dan Hawkins, an unpaid assistant after things didn't work out. He'd been at Eastern Washington, Washington State. He'd bounced around a few locations, but he's a great man, great guy. And, that rivalry probably doesn't have the same cachet that it did at one point, but it's still a big rivalry because these are two like-minded schools that, do compete for a lot of the same athletes. And it's always a beautiful location to go to, too.
Definitely. So I want to finish with this, Scott.
Yeah.
And then we'll be off to our weekend.
Okay.
Money is always a big thing. And when you're a football alum and when you're an alum of the school and when there's NIL, which is being, now a just accepted entity amongst the country, and now we're upping scholarship amounts, and conferences are voting on that individually, which is a fascinating story to follow. One of the things that I am wondering, is about stadium expansion.
Yep.
And is stadium expansion a criteria for our program to move to the FBS level in the Mountain West Conference? Or just taking that out of the equation, do you know, are we having suites being built? Are we thinking of a second deck? Like, where's the whole stadium expansion piece at? Is it just dormant on a back burner somewhere?
I think there's plans in place for that, and I certainly don't have the official word to like really share anything like that. But I think you can say it's pretty safe to say that given the potential move and everything else going on, that those things are in the works, right? You know, because if you're going to raise money at the football level, you need to have the suites and you need to have some of those things that stadium, as beautiful as it is, doesn't currently have. So
yeah,
I think that's part of the game plan as they move forward, you know, for Davis. And I think the eventual game plan is they would love to move up in football. They're happy in the Big Sky for right now. It works, but I think the long-term vision is to move up like all the other sports are, you know, with the Mountain West.
Yeah. All right. Well, unless there's anything else on your mind in Aggieland.
We didn't talk about men's basketball. If you've been looking, Jim Less and his crew with Kevin Nosik and John Omitzker-Jones, Kyle Vogt, they've been out recruiting.
Yeah,
we are going to have the all-international team next year.
Seriously, I saw that.
Serious recruits from around the globe. So I'm real excited about that. And I know they've got some exciting games on their schedule. They haven't released their schedule yet, so it's not public, but I know there's some marquee games coming up for the Ags in men's basketball too.
Yeah, you got your work cut out.
There's going to be some pronunciations that are going to have to take some time to get used to.
I'm going to take a crack at each one of them. There's Abdullah Amzil, Jonathan Nud Jihidi,
yeah,
Omer Sulhanovich. Oh, I like that one.
Yeah.
Ilan SOSs. I mean, if these aren't star names, and if you aren't going to be put to the test, I don't know.
Hey, you can get one right at a time, but what if all four of them were on a fast break?
You need nicknames.
Yeah.
Quick.
Yeah. It could get dangerous. So I'm going to have to do a lot of prep for basketball, but I'm excited. And, you know, you talked about Mike Bibby and Sac State and, of course, Shaq, you know, whatever role he may or may not have. But UC Davis was so lucky to have Jim Less, a fellow Aggie, a fellow King player, you know, just so rock solid in this community and does such a great job, and the longest tenured staff in all of college basketball. And I think that's what you have to look at for UC Davis just in general, right? There's a lot of noise at Sac State, and, you know, some of it I think is exciting. Some of it we'll see what plays out. But for UC Davis, you talk about rocks of consistency. Tim Plow, who was a former player, former assistant coach, now the head coach. He's not going anywhere. He said this is his job for the next 20 years. You've had Jim Less, who's coming up in his 15th season. Jennifer Gross on the women's side, coming up on her 15th season. You just don't find this type of consistency, this character, this level of quality coaching at the highest sports. UC Davis is so lucky. Rocco DeLuca, AD's done a great job with hiring, coaches at this school and keeping them there for the long term. And, you know, that's the strength of Davis, and that's how they're going to build the program, right? I mean, the NIL money is important. You're going to have to work through the reality of transfer portals, and we see the coaches doing that. But at the core, you have to have great coaches. You have to have great people. And that's what keeps me around the program so much, is that there's so many great people and so many quality people who are there for the long term, you know, that makes me want to be a part of it and come back for my 18th year broadcasting the football games and my 24th for basketball. And that's why I love it. And it's good to be on the podcast, and you're growing this Aggie Pride podcast, and we'll be here for the next 2 or 3 decades talking Aggie sports. And I miss Dwight. Dwight shouldn't be allowed to go golfing and miss the broadcast. There's something wrong about that.
It is. Okay, here's my real last question.
Yeah.
Bold Aqua Lake Tahoe Sky Blue Unis.
Yes.
Campus wide. for
Yeah.
UC Davis athletics. Give me your grade from A to F.
Wow, you're a tough grader if that's the case. Um, I've always been a traditionalist, so like with anything else, I'll get used to it. Like I do think they are sharp, so I can't say that I don't like the new look or anything like that, and I'm excited to be a part of it. And this world of college sports, the one thing that we know is, I mean, Oregon set the trend, right? Everybody wants to have 10 different uniforms and different color combinations and all of that stuff. So I kind of get it. If you're asking me personally, my favorite, I still love the old school, Yale blue and gold with the Davis on the logo helmets. And I'm an old school guy, but the aqua, I can get down with that too.
I like how you did not grade it.
Let's hear your grade. What are you going to give it?
I will give it a B minus.
Okay. And why do you feel that way? What's your feeling about it?
Well, the way they've marketed them is a white helmet, a blue top, white pants, and blue shoes. And to me, it's giving off practice vibes a little bit.
Okay.
And at the same time, the way they rolled it out with the shoot at Lake Tahoe and with the footage of the, Tahoe Environmental Research Center boat going through the lake, I thought that was A+. So and I think the logo on the helmet is A+. Like the Lake Tahoe shape with the CA inside. I think that is kind of beautiful. Cool. But when I see it from afar, then I'm not as much like, oh, those look really cool. I'm more so with you where I feel like the classic either Davis script or the CA on the helmet with either an all blue or a mixture of navy and gold is my favorite. But I like how there's the creativity points in there too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and it's for themed games, right? So I can live with that. But for example, I know you and I disagree on this one. You're a Giants fan. I'm a Dodgers fan. So, but I will say, like, when I see the Tuesday Night Giants uniforms, I laugh because I just think they're silly. Now, they're themed jerseys, and you may like them, but also, when I see when the Dodgers wearing their city jerseys, or what I would call the all Smurf jerseys from a couple of years ago, where they're just all blue with the blue pants, I don't really care for that either. I'm a traditionalist. Put my Dodgers in the white home jerseys with the cursive Dodger blue with the red accent and the LA hat. That's just me, but I'm old. So I get that. And I buy into that already. So, I can buy into the aqua jerseys. I like the concept of it, everything that you just described. It will just be a little different for me to see Davis in a non-traditional Davis color.
Yeah. Well, August 23rd on ESPN in Montgomery against Mercer. It's only a couple months away. Thanks for hopping on, Scott Marsh, and we will talk to you again real soon.
I hope so. I look forward to doing this. I can't wait to hear all the future upcoming Aggie Pride podcasts throughout the season.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Aggie Pride, a UC Davis football podcast. Big thanks to our guest, Scott Marsh, for joining us and sharing his insight. Always great having him on. If you enjoyed the conversation or if you enjoyed the pod, be sure to like, subscribe, share, and leave us a review. It really helps us keep things rolling. Thanks again for listening, and we will catch y'all next time. Go Ags.